Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every life when heaven leans in, whispers your name, and declares, it's time. A moment when the familiar becomes uncomfortable and the unknown begins to pull at your spirit. You may not see it yet, but God is shifting the ground beneath your feet, aligning circumstances, people, and timing for a purpose bigger than you imagined. Change is not your enemy. Change is the vehicle by which destiny arrives. And when God begins to realign your life, your only responsibility is to recognize the season and respond with courage. Tonight, we step into that revelation together. When heaven begins to rearrange your steps, you can feel it long before you can explain it. There is a gentle disturbance in your spirit, a quiet nudge, a divine discomfort that tells you this is not where you're meant to stay. And sometimes you don't understand it immediately. Sometimes it feels as though life is shaking beneath your feet. Routines are shifting, doors are closing, and familiar pathways no longer feel familiar. But hear this, whenever God begins altering your direction, it is never random. It is always intentional, always strategic, always connected to something greater than your present understanding. You may look around and wonder, why is this happening now? But the truth is, timing is everything in the kingdom. Heaven does not waste moments. When God aligns your steps, He aligns them with precision, with purpose, with a destination already prepared long before you took your first breath. And that means every transition, every disruption, every unexpected turn is part of a divine recalibration. Even the things you thought were setbacks are often setups for a new season. Pause and let that settle in your heart. Many people resist alignment because alignment requires surrender. It requires letting go of the comfort of predictability. But what if the very thing you're trying to hold on to is what God is trying to wean you from? What if the place you've settled in is too small for what He wants to release in your next chapter? Alignment is heaven's way of saying, stretch, grow, move. Not because you are failing, but because you are outgrowing the space of your old season. And sometimes heaven aligns your steps by disconnecting you from people who can't walk with you into your future. It's not punishment, it's protection, it's preservation, it's preparation. You cannot take everyone with you into the place God is leading you. Some relationships were only meant for a chapter, not the entire book. Some voices were meant to encourage you in transition, not accompany you into destiny. And when heaven starts realigning your circle, it is because your assignment requires a different environment. But alignment is not just about where you're going, it's about who you must become on the way there. God is not simply taking you to a new place. He is shaping you into a new person. Your character, your discipline, your perspective, your faith, all of these are being adjusted, elevated, refined. Why? Because the next level of purpose requires a next level version of you. And heaven will not promote you into a season you are not prepared to sustain. So when things start shifting, don't panic. When doors close, don't fear. When God rearranges your steps, lean in. Ask the right question, not why is this happening, but what is this preparing me for? Because once you understand divine alignment, you stop resisting change and start embracing destiny. And remember, when heaven begins to rearrange your steps, it is only the beginning. Because the moment God shifts your steps, He's about to shift your entire season. And that leads us straight into the next point. There comes a moment in every person's journey when the atmosphere around them begins to shift. Quietly at first, then unmistakably. It's that subtle awareness that something is changing, not on the outside, but deep within your spirit. You begin to sense a pull, a stirring, an agitation that tells you your current season is reaching its expiration date. And here's the truth. God never transitions you without giving you signals. The problem is, many ignore the signals because they prefer the safety of routine over the risk of purpose. But listen carefully. Every new season begins with divine disturbance. When God is shifting your season, He will disrupt your comfort, interrupt your normal, and challenge your patterns. The very things that used to satisfy you will no longer fulfill you. The conversations you once enjoyed will begin to feel empty. The places that once inspired you will suddenly feel too small. Why? Because when God is transitioning you, He stretches your inner capacity before He changes your outer circumstances. You grow spiritually long before you relocate physically. And then comes the moment when you realize, I cannot stay here. Not because here is bad, but because here is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. That awareness is divine. That restlessness is not frustration, it is revelation. It is heaven saying, your time in this chapter is ending. And when heaven announces a new season, everything around you starts cooperating with that transition, even the things you didn't expect. But here's where many hesitate, because transition always involves uncertainty. We love clarity, predictability, familiarity. Yet destiny is rarely found in familiar places. Destiny calls you into uncharted territory. It requires trust, courage, and obedience. And the question you must confront is simple. Are you willing to leave what is comfortable to pursue what is promised? Because every new season demands a response. God can shift your season, but you must shift your posture. And what is the purpose of this divine transition? It is to move you from preparation to manifestation, to bring you out of the waiting room and into the assignment room, to align your gifts, your timing, your relationships, and your opportunities with the version of you that heaven has been molding. You are not just being moved, you are being positioned. Positioned for impact, positioned for influence, positioned for the next phase of your calling. But hear this, before God reveals what's next, He first requires you to release what was. You cannot carry yesterday into tomorrow. You cannot drag old habits into a new season. You cannot walk into your future with the vocabulary, mindset, or limitations of your past. This is why He shifts your season so that you can shift your identity. And just when you think the transition is complete, God reveals the next layer, the deeper reason, the greater purpose. Because once you recognize the shift in your season, the next step becomes inevitable, and it leads us into the next point. There comes a moment in your journey when preparation must give way to movement, when God shifts from shaping you privately to positioning you publicly. And that moment often arrives quietly, without fanfare, without warning. Suddenly, the instructions become clearer, the opportunities begin to appear. The internal voice that once whispered now speaks with authority. It is heaven saying, now, move, step forward. Because there is a time to wait and there is a time to walk. A time to learn and a time to launch. And when God says move, hesitation becomes disobedience. But why does this moment feel so weighty? Because every small step of obedience carries massive implications for your destiny. You may think the instruction is simple, little, insignificant, but nothing God asks you to do is ever small. A seed may be tiny, but a forest is hidden inside it. A single act of obedience may look ordinary, but it contains extraordinary outcomes. And this is where many people miss their moment. They're waiting for a dramatic sign while God is asking for a simple step. And sometimes that step looks uncomfortable. It stretches your faith. It pulls you out of the shadows and into responsibility. It demands that you confront your own hesitation. You may ask, but what if I'm not ready? Yet heaven responds, you are ready enough to begin. Because God does not call the ready, He readies the called. The moment He says move, He empowers the movement. The moment He instructs, He equips. The moment He opens a door, He strengthens your feet to walk through it. And here's something crucial. Movement in the kingdom is rarely dramatic. It often looks like small decisions, consistent action, disciplined obedience. It looks like showing up when no one notices. It looks like saying yes to opportunities that intimidate you. It looks like trusting the process, even when the results aren't visible yet. Every great destiny unfolds one obedient step at a time. But notice this. When God says move, He also begins to rearrange everything around you to support that movement. The right connections show up. The right resources appear. The right ideas flow. Even obstacles that once blocked you start shifting out of your path. It's not coincidence, it's divine strategy. Heaven does not invest instruction where it has not already arranged provision. And perhaps the most powerful part of this moment is this. Movement activates manifestation. You cannot see what God promised until you walk toward what God spoke. You cannot access what's ahead while clinging to what's behind. Every step forward pulls the future closer. Every act of obedience unlocks a new dimension of purpose. This is why God insists on movement, because what He prepared for you is waiting just beyond your comfort zone. But here's the question that will define your next chapter. Are you willing to move when God says move? Because once you take that first step, something remarkable happens. The journey shifts, the assignment deepens, and heaven reveals a greater, more demanding phase of alignment, leading us directly into the next point. There comes a point in your journey when God doesn't just shift your steps. He recalibrates your entire destiny, not because you have failed, but because you have grown. Not because your original path was wrong, but because your updated purpose requires an updated direction. And this recalibration is subtle at first felt, before it is understood, sensed long before it becomes visible. Your desires begin to change. Your priorities evolve. Your vision sharpens. What once captivated you no longer holds your attention, and the things you once overlooked suddenly carry weight, urgency, significance. That is the sign heaven is adjusting your spiritual compass. And here's the remarkable part. Destiny recalibration is not about taking you somewhere new. It is about aligning you with who you were always meant to be. You are not becoming someone different. You are becoming someone truer, someone clearer, someone more refined. Every experience, every setback, every victory has been shaping you like a sculptor, revealing the masterpiece hidden beneath the stone. And now, God begins guiding you into alignment with the version of you He always saw. But recalibration requires honesty. It demands that you evaluate your direction, your relationships, your habits, your environment. Because you cannot walk into divine alignment while carrying conflicting alliances. You cannot pursue destiny while entertaining distractions. You cannot expect clarity while tolerating chaos. So God begins to highlight what no longer fits: ideas, attitudes, connections that were acceptable in your previous season, but incompatible with your next. And when God shines that light, you must choose. Cling to what is familiar or commit to what is divine. You see, destiny recalibration is never random. It is always strategic. God adjusts your course in response to your growth. As you mature, He shifts your responsibility. As your faith expands, He expands your assignment. As your understanding deepens, He deepens your impact. This is why some doors you prayed for remain closed, because they were designed for the old version of you, not the evolved one. This is why some opportunities pass by, because heaven knows you are being prepared for something higher, something greater, something more aligned with the magnitude of your calling. And here's the part many overlook. Recalibration often feels uncomfortable. You may feel stretched, unsettled, even out of place. But that discomfort is not a sign of misdirection, it is a sign of elevation. God is stretching your capacity to match your future usefulness. He is sharpening your sensitivity so you can recognize divine timing. He is refining your discernment so you can distinguish between what is good and what is God. But as this recalibration takes place, something powerful begins to happen. You become magnetized to your assignment. The right people start noticing you. The right doors start opening. The right opportunities start aligning. Not because you force them, but because destiny responds to alignment the way metal responds to a magnet. Once you are calibrated internally, everything around you begins responding externally. And just when you think the alignment is complete, God reveals another layer, a deeper level of adjustment, a more profound shift within your environment, leading us straight into the next point. There are moments when God interrupts your routine, not to unsettle your life, but to awaken your destiny. These interruptions are rarely convenient, rarely comfortable, and almost never expected. Yet they are always purposeful. You may be walking through your usual patterns, following familiar rhythms, moving through the cycles you've grown accustomed to, and suddenly something shifts. A door closes. A conversation stings. A plan collapses. An opportunity appears out of nowhere. And you realize this isn't random. This is divine intervention disguised as disruption. Because when God interrupts your routine, He is dismantling the illusion of normalcy that kept you confined to a season you have outgrown. Routine is safe, predictable, manageable, but routine can also become a cage. It can blind you to possibilities that require movement. It can cause you to settle in a place that was meant to be temporary. So heaven intervenes. Heaven shakes. Heaven disrupts. Not to harm you, but to reposition you. Not to confuse you, but to clarify you. Not to break your life, but to break your patterns. And here's the truth many never grasp. God's interruptions are actually invitations. Invitations to growth. Invitations to transformation. Invitations to obedience. Invitations to a higher dimension of purpose. You may ask, why would God interrupt something that feels comfortable? Because comfort is the enemy of calling. You don't grow in comfort. You don't evolve in comfort. You don't discover destiny in comfort. So God stirs the waters of your life so you can no longer remain where you were. Think about it. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in your life didn't come from your plans. They came from God's interruptions. The moment a plan fell apart was the moment something greater had room to emerge. The moment you felt pushed out of one place was the moment you were positioned for another. Every divine interruption carries a message. You cannot stay here. I am taking you somewhere else. But you must be discerning. Not every disruption is an attack. Sometimes what you call a storm is actually a signal. A signal that your season has shifted. A signal that heaven is preparing you for repositioning. A signal that the environment around you must change so the assignment within you can grow. And if you misinterpret divine interruptions as obstacles, you will resist what was meant to advance you. God interrupts your routine to break the cycle of stagnation. He interrupts to create space for new vision. He interrupts to isolate you long enough to hear His voice again. He interrupts to disconnect you from people who can't walk into the next chapter with you. He interrupts because destiny cannot thrive in dead patterns. And then, once you begin to respond, once you surrender to the interruption, once you embrace the shift, once you allow God to lead you beyond routine, something powerful happens. The discomfort turns into clarity. The confusion turns into direction, and the interruption becomes the doorway to your next season. But this interruption is only the beginning, because once God breaks your routine, He begins transforming your entire identity to match the magnitude of your assignment. And that leads us directly into the next point. There comes a moment when heaven announces, the appointed time has come. Not next year, not someday, not when you feel ready, but now. And when that moment arrives, you can feel it echo through your spirit like a quiet thunder, subtle yet undeniable. Suddenly, what once felt delayed now feels imminent. What once seemed distant now draws close. Your dreams, your assignments, your investments, your prayers, they all begin aligning in a way that tells you, this is the season heaven prepared you for. But here is the tension many face. When the appointed time arrives, it rarely looks like the perfect time. It rarely arrives wrapped in convenience or clarity. Sometimes it comes during chaos. Sometimes it comes while you're still healing. Sometimes it comes when you feel the least qualified. But heaven does not check your comfort. He checks your readiness. And readiness is not perfection. Readiness is willingness. Readiness is obedience. Readiness is the courage to say, Lord, if you're moving now, then I'm moving too. And you will notice something powerful. When God declares your appointed time, everything around you starts shifting to accommodate that declaration. Grace increases, favor accelerates, opportunities emerge. People who once ignored you suddenly recognize your value. Doors that were welded shut begin to open without force, not because you pushed them, but because time unlocked them. Purpose has a schedule. Destiny has a calendar. And when heaven says, it's time, no earthly resistance can stop what God has set in motion. But with every appointed time comes a requirement, a responsibility, a demand on your maturity, discipline, and focus. You cannot enter a divine season with a distracted mind. You cannot walk into your assignment with divided loyalty. The appointed time requires alignment, full alignment. Spirit, mind, habits, relationships, priorities, everything must shift into agreement with what God is doing in your life. So the question becomes, are you prepared to rise to the moment heaven has activated? Because destiny does not wait for hesitation. Divine timing does not pause for fear. When God opens a window, you must move through it before it closes. And this is not to pressure you, this is to awaken you, to remind you that what God is releasing in this season is too significant to approach casually. This is your moment to step boldly, to think differently, to pray with intention, to walk with authority, to act with conviction, because the time for change has not just arrived, it has arrived for you. Now step into this truth, embrace it, declare it, and prepare yourself for what heaven is unfolding, because you are entering a season where delay breaks, where clarity increases, where doors open without explanation, where purpose accelerates beyond logic, where divine alignment becomes visible, undeniable, unstoppable, where the timing of God meets the obedience of your heart, and everything in your life begins to shift.